Have you ever been in the middle of explaining yourself, defending a choice, justifying a feeling, and felt the life drain right out of you? That moment when the words you're speaking start to feel hollow, like you're not trying to be understood anymore, but simply trying to win a case that nobody is judging. It's a strange kind of exhaustion, isn't it? Not the tiredness from a long run, but a deeper, quieter fatigue that settles into your bones after a long day of trying to be seen, heard, and validated by everyone around you. The more we chase that recognition, the more we seem to lose the one person we should be trying to understand, ourselves. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent a lifetime mapping the hidden architecture of the human psyche, saw this as the central conflict of modern life. He observed that we spend our early years desperately seeking our worth in the reflection of others' eyes. We build our identity on the feedback we get from parents, peers, and society. But Jung believed that true maturity, what he called individuation, begins the moment you stop looking outward for validation and start the quiet, often unsettling, journey inward. It's a process where you step away from the roles you've been assigned to confront the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to prove your existence with words, you actually begin to live it. In this video, we're going to explore a concept that might feel counterintuitive in our loud, hyper-connected world. We're going to talk about the profound, almost magical power of silence, not just the absence of noise, but a strategic withdrawal of your energy from the endless social drama that drains you. We'll look at how pulling back your focus can untangle the knots in your life, bring you face to face with the parts of yourself you've been ignoring, and ultimately, create a state of inner order that makes your path forward clearer than it's ever been. So, let's start with the first reason why silence is the most radical act of self-liberation you can take. 1. How silence strips away the role you were never meant to play. There's a peculiar pattern in human interaction. Think about the last time you were in a meeting or a group conversation where you felt slightly insecure. What was your first instinct? It was probably to speak, to fill the space, to add an opinion, even if it wasn't fully formed. We have this deep-seated belief that our voice is our armor. We talk the loudest when we feel the most uncertain. We over-explain when we feel misunderstood. We justify our choices when we sense the slightest hint of judgment. But if you become a quiet observer of your own behavior, you'll notice something important. Most of those words aren't springing from a place of calm, grounded truth. They're arising from a frantic need, a need to protect an image. Carl Jung had a name for this image. He called it the persona. In Latin, persona was the mask worn by actors. Jung used it to describe the social facade we all wear to adapt to the world. It's the version of you that shows up to work, the version that speaks to your in-laws, the version that posts on social media. The persona isn't inherently evil. It's a necessary tool for navigating society. You wouldn't speak to your boss the same way you speak to your childhood best friend. The mask helps us function. The problem begins when the mask fuses to your skin. When you start believing that the role you play is who you truly are. When this happens, life becomes a performance. You're not living, you're maintaining. You're spending your precious mental energy not on growth, but on managing a reputation. Let's bring this to life. Imagine you post a thought on social media. It could be a personal opinion, a piece of art, or just a snapshot of your day. What happens next? For many of us, a subtle anxiety creeps in. You find yourself checking the notifications obsessively. A few minutes later, a comment appears. It's critical. Your heart rate spikes. Instantly, your mind is crafting a response, a defense. You're preparing to explain yourself, to clarify your point, to prove that you are, in fact, a reasonable, intelligent, and good person. But pause and ask yourself this rhetorical question. Do you even care about the original topic anymore? Or is your entire nervous system hijacked by the feeling that your public image is under attack? In that moment, who is doing the talking? It's not your deepest self. It's the persona, scared of being unmasked. This is where silence becomes an act of liberation. When you choose not to respond immediately, when you resist the urge to explain who you are to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, you are doing something radical. You are withdrawing the energy you normally feed into that mask. And in that empty space, something profound begins to happen. You start to realize that the immense pressure you felt wasn't coming from the world at large. It was coming from the effort you were exerting to maintain a flawless image. When you stop defending the image, the mind feels lighter. It's like an actor stepping off a stage after a grueling performance, finally free to drop the character. Jung once wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." Think about that. The mask is so convincing that both you and the world believe it's the real you. You become accustomed to being seen in a certain way, to reacting the way people expect. The boundary between the actor and the role blurs. Silence is the wrecking ball that shatters that cycle. When you're not rushing to fill the air with your familiar role's script, you gain a few precious seconds to simply observe. Imagine being in a heated argument with a partner or a friend. Instead of firing back with your pre-planned defense, you pause. You feel the heat rising in your chest. You notice the urge to bite back. But you don't. You let the moment pass. And then something interesting happens. The words you were about to say, the clever retorts, the justifications, suddenly seem petty. You realize they were just the reflexive flailing of your ego trying to save face. In a professional setting, there are always those who feel they must speak in every meeting, offer an opinion on every point, for fear that silence will be mistaken for incompetence. Yet, have you noticed that the people with true authority, the ones with genuine confidence, are often the quietest? They observe, they listen, they process, and when they finally do speak, their words carry a weight that the constant chatter can never match. Their speech isn't a reaction of the persona, it's the result of conscious reflection. And here's a curious side effect. Silence changes the dynamics of power in any interaction. When you create a space of silence after someone speaks, they often feel compelled to fill it. They'll start explaining themselves further, revealing more than they intended. They'll project their own assumptions onto your quietness. This isn't about manipulation, it's about self-possession. The person who doesn't need to constantly prove themselves holds a quiet, unshakable center. They're not trying to control others. They simply can't be controlled by the need for external validation. But the most important benefit of this silence is what it reveals to you. When you stop performing, deeper questions begin to surface. Questions like, what do I actually want? Am I living my life or just reacting to it? Is this thing I'm angry about truly important, or am I just afraid of what others might think? These questions don't arise in the middle of a noisy conversation. They only appear in the quiet. So, stepping into silence isn't a retreat from the world. It's a necessary step back to see the stage you've been standing on. And when you see it clearly, you realize your true self doesn't need a constant PR campaign. It just needs to be lived. And when the social mask begins to loosen, something else emerges from the shadows. Not the outer world, but the inner one. The parts of ourselves we've been avoiding start to knock on the door of our awareness. 2. Why silence is the only way to meet the shadow you've hidden. There's a deeper reason why most people are terrified of being alone with their own thoughts. It's not that they dislike solitude. It's that when the external noise stops, the podcasts, the social media feeds, the work emails, the Netflix shows, something else starts. A hum from within. A voice. Actually, many voices. The voices of all the parts of you that you've been too busy to listen to. In the relentless rush of daily life, We have developed countless methods to drown out this inner sound. We create a wall of noise so thick that we don't have to hear what's behind it. It's like stirring a muddy pond constantly. You never get to see what lies at the bottom. But when you let the water settle, when you embrace silence, the mud begins to sink, and the deep floor of your psyche is revealed. In Jung's psychology, the collection of things lying at that bottom is called the shadow. It's not a spooky demonic force. It's simply the archive of all the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, or suppressed. It's the anger you weren't allowed to express as a child, the jealousy you're ashamed to admit, the weakness you've worked so hard to hide from everyone, including yourself, the desires that don't fit the good person narrative you've built. Think back. When we were young, we learned a simple formula. Certain behaviors get love, others get punishment. We learned to be obedient, to be kind, to be positive. But the process of building this acceptable self also creates a basement. Any trait that didn't get love, any impulse that felt too dark or too raw, was banished down there. Jung called this the shadow. It's like a locked room in the house of your mind. From the outside, the house looks bright and tidy. But behind that closed door, your unacknowledged humanity is piling up. Silence holds a unique power. It picks the lock on that door. When you're no longer occupied with the external world, your psyche begins to drift back to what was forgotten. You might have experienced this in the middle of the night. The phone is off. The house is quiet. You're lying there, and suddenly, an old, uncomfortable memory surfaces. A sharp comment you made years ago. A moment of cowardice you never forgave yourself for. A wave of sadness you pushed down at a funeral. Your immediate instinct is to grab your phone, to escape back into the noise. But Jung would say that this moment, this uncomfortable confrontation, is one of the most valuable opportunities for psychological growth you'll ever get. Because the shadow only loses its invisible power over your life when you finally turn on the light and look at it. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is crucial. You can't heal what you refuse to see. Consider a familiar scenario. There's a person you know who is perpetually calm and agreeable. They never get angry. They're always the nice one. And then, one day, for what seems like a trivial reason, they explode, they scream, they rage, and everyone is shocked. Where did that come from? It didn't appear out of nowhere. It was there, all along, in the shadow. It was built from every moment they suppressed their irritation, every time they told themselves, "I shouldn't be angry." Good people don't get angry. Suppressed emotions don't vanish. They just go underground, accumulating pressure. When the pressure hits a breaking point, the shadow erupts, often in a way that's disproportionate and destructive. But if that person had moments of silence, if they dared to admit to themselves, "Yes, I am angry, I am hurt, I am weak," then those emotions wouldn't need to explode. They would be seen, integrated, and disarmed. The pressure would release gradually, rather than catastrophically. This idea of withdrawing into silence to face the self is an ancient one. In the spiritual traditions of the world, it's a recurring theme. Moses encountered the divine in the vast silence of the desert. Elijah heard the still small voice only after the wind, earthquake, and fire had passed. Before his public mission, Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness, facing the temptations of the human condition. These aren't just religious stories. They're profound psychological metaphors. The desert is a symbol of the stripped-down self, the place where all distractions are removed, and you are left with nothing but your own raw, untamed soul. It's in that emptiness that truth begins to speak. What's fascinating is that when people finally muster the courage to face their shadow, they become noticeably freer, not because the darkness disappears, but because it no longer needs to be hidden. A person who truly understands their capacity for anger is rarely controlled by it. A person who accepts their fear is harder to manipulate. Jung saw this as the foundation of genuine strength. Not the brittle strength of someone trying to appear perfect, but the resilient strength of someone who has walked through their own inner hell and emerged with a comprehensive map of their own soul. There's a paradox here. The more honest we become with our darkness, the more peaceful we become. Because we stop spending our life force on an internal civil war. We stop running from ourselves. So, when you choose silence, you aren't just getting a break from the world. You're returning home to meet your own soul. In that stillness, you start to see the old wounds you were too busy to tend to, the emotions you were too proud to admit, and even the hidden strengths you never knew you had because you were always too loud to hear them. Silence is an honest mirror, and if you're brave enough to look into it, you realize the darkness isn't your enemy. It's simply the part of you that's been waiting the longest to be understood. But seeing the darkness is only the first step. When a person stops running and starts looking, a deeper transformation begins. The energy that was scattered across 100 different people and problems starts to flow back to its source. 3. How bringing your focus home recovers the energy you've been losing. Let's talk about exhaustion, the kind that doesn't go away after a good night's sleep. Most of us assume we're tired because we work too hard. But Jung had a different insight. He believed that most of our exhaustion comes not from the work we do, but from the scattering of our mind. Our attention, our life force, gets pulled in too many directions at once. From the moment you wake up, your energy begins to leak. A text from a friend in distress, an email from a colleague needing a favor, a family member's subtle guilt trip, a political headline that makes your blood boil. Because we're taught that being a good person means being available, we rarely say no. We open the floodgates of our attention to everyone and everything. And then, by mid-afternoon, we're drained. It's not that we don't care. It's that we've allowed our life force to be siphoned into 1,000 different streams. Jung compared psychological energy to a river. If you channel that river into one deep channel, it has the power to carve canyons and move mountains. But if you let it spread out into 1,000 shallow streams, it becomes weak. It evaporates, and it loses its force. It can't even wet the ground, let alone change the landscape. Focusing on yourself, what Jung called introversion, is the process of reclaiming those scattered streams. This isn't about becoming cold, selfish, or building walls. It's about stopping the leaks. It's about no longer allowing every external demand, every emotional drama, to automatically take the center seat in your mind. Jung used the term libido to describe this psychological energy. It's often misunderstood as purely sexual, but for Jung, it was much broader. It's the life energy itself. It's the drive that fuels your creativity, your thoughts, your actions, and your growth. When you are constantly focused on others, trying to manage their emotions, seeking their approval, or reacting to their chaos, your libido is flowing outward. It's like holding a flashlight that you're constantly pointing at other people, leaving your own path in darkness. When you begin to pull that focus back, the first thing you experience isn't selfishness, it's a surge of energy. Your thoughts stop spinning in circles. Your vague goals start to sharpen. You begin to realize that a massive portion of what drained you yesterday wasn't even your responsibility. It was a psychological habit you formed, the habit of being the emotional anchor for everyone else. Let me share a story. There was a woman, let's call her Sarah, who was the therapist for everyone in her social circle. When friends had problems, they called her. When there was a conflict in her family, she was the mediator. She was the one everyone leaned on. But during a period of deep introspection, she admitted to feeling a strange, hollow exhaustion that she couldn't explain. One evening, after spending 3 hours on the phone helping 2 mutual friends reconcile a misunderstanding, she hung up and felt utterly empty. She had nothing left. It was in a quiet moment of reflection that she realized the problem. She could describe the emotions of her friends with vivid detail. She knew what they were feeling, what they needed, what they feared. But when asked how she felt, she drew a blank. She didn't know. Her energy had been flowing outward for so long that she was a stranger to her own inner state. The shift began when she implemented a small rule. Before saying yes to someone else's emotional need, she would pause for a few minutes, breathe, and ask herself if she had the energy to give without depleting herself. Those small pauses slowly began to rechannel the river of her life force back into her own vessel. Jung had a famous saying about family, but its implications are universal. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. This is often interpreted as children living out their parents' unfulfilled dreams. But more deeply, it's about how we carry the emotional debris of others. When we live too much for others, we start carrying their expectations, their unresolved conflicts, and their unfinished stories. We become a vessel for their lives, and in the process, our own energy is colonized. Focusing on yourself is the radical act of giving those burdens back, not through anger or rejection, but through a quiet, firm realization. Everyone must walk their own path. You are not responsible for managing the emotions of every adult in your life. When you stop carrying what isn't yours, a strange lightness descends. The energy that was leaking out starts to return, like a tide coming back in. One of the most tangible signs of this shift is a growing stillness in your mind. It's not a heavy, depressing quiet. It's a calm like the surface of a lake after the wind stops. In this state, you think more clearly. You work more efficiently. You realize that the things that used to cause you anxiety, the gossip, the minor slights, the frantic pace of news, simply aren't worth the energy they once demanded. And something else interesting happens. When you reclaim your energy and center it within yourself, the people around you start to change how they interact with you. You haven't announced anything. You haven't started a fight. But your presence has changed. A person with centered energy carries a quiet stability that is palpable. They don't need to speak loudly to be heard. They don't need to prove themselves. Others can feel that this person is standing on solid ground. And that stability gives their words and their silence an authority that frantic energy never can. You might still be the person your friends come to for advice. You might still be the reliable one at work. But the dynamic has shifted. You are no longer giving from an empty tank. You are giving from a center. You are no longer a leaf blown by the wind. You've become a tree with deep roots. When your energy is no longer scattered, the mind quiets. And in that quiet, another door opens. A door that leads not just to a calmer life, but to a deeper understanding of existence itself. 4. Why silence is the gateway to a deeper reality. There's a truth that many people touch on, but rarely explore fully. Silence and focus don't just organize your life, they unlock a portal to an entirely new dimension of experience. When the surface of your life settles, when you stop being jerked around by impulsive reactions and pointless arguments, something else starts to emerge from the depths. In Jung's framework, this is the beginning of individuation. It's where the ego, your conscious mind, starts to have a dialogue with the vast, unknown territory of the unconscious. And that conversation only becomes audible in silence. Jung believed that within each person lies a profound inner depth. This isn't a mystical, far-off place. It's the bedrock of your own being, buried under the layers of daily noise, the notifications, the endless chatter, the mental checklists. Our minds are like the surface of an ocean, constantly churned by the winds of modern life. Only when the wind dies down can we see what exists below. Entering this depth doesn't require a pilgrimage to a monastery. It starts with small, intentional acts. It might be the 5 minutes after you turn off all your screens at night, simply sitting with the weight of the day. It might be the pause you take before responding to a critical email, allowing your nervous system to settle. Or it might be the act of journaling, putting pen to paper to let the thoughts that have been buzzing in the background finally find a voice. These actions might seem mundane, but they are like the first steps of a descent. Each small moment of silence is a key, slowly unlocking the door to the deeper landscape of your soul. Have you ever had a moment late at night when the world is finally quiet and a thought surfaces from nowhere? A question you've long ignored returns. Why did I choose this path? What is it that I really want? Is this all there is? This can feel uncomfortable. The mind, used to constant stimulation, often panics at these big, unanswerable questions. It reaches for the phone, the remote, anything to fill the void. But Jung argued that it is precisely at this threshold of silence, at this moment of discomfort, that we are closest to our true depth. If you have the courage to step forward, to sit with that uncomfortable question, you enter the space where psychological transformation begins. Interestingly, modern neuroscience is beginning to map what Jung described intuitively. Researchers have identified a network in the brain called the default mode network, M. This network becomes active when we are not focused on external tasks, when we are daydreaming, reflecting, or letting our minds wander. It's the system that integrates memories, processes emotions, and helps us form a coherent sense of self. When you step away from the external world and enter a state of quiet, your DM lights up. It's the brain's way of cleaning house, of making sense of your experience. Science is now confirming what Jung knew a century ago, that turning inward is not a luxury. It's a biological necessity for a healthy, integrated mind. Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." The path to clarity is inward. However, entering this depth can't be faked. You can't sit in a meditation posture with a calm face while your inner world is a war zone. The depth opens only when the silence is genuine. When you are willing to sit with yourself, not to escape, but to observe, not to decorate your emotions with positive affirmations, but to look at the raw data of your being. When you do this, a new sense of unity begins to form. The scattered fragments of your life, your memories, your regrets, your fears, your hopes, start to weave together. You begin to feel like a whole person, not just a collection of roles and reactions. You stand on a stronger foundation. In many spiritual traditions, the path to truth is paved with silence. The monk sits in stillness not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. The hermit retreats from the city not to reject society, but to find a deeper level of reality within. Jung recognized that this is an ancient archetype embedded in the human psyche, the archetype of the hermit. It's the image of a person stepping back from the noise of the crowd, carrying a small lantern to illuminate the darkness. That lantern is your consciousness. The darkness is the unconscious. And when you choose silence, you are stepping into the journey of that hermit, traveling into the darkness to find your own light. And the remarkable effect is that once you touch this depth, your perception of the outside world shifts. The petty comparisons that used to gnaw at you lose their sting. The harsh judgments of others no longer shake your foundation. You begin to feel, for the first time, that you are standing on your own ground, not on the shifting sands of public opinion. From that place, your actions and your words carry a new weight, the weight of authenticity. You're no longer a cork bobbing on the waves of circumstance. You're a tree whose roots run deep. Silence and focus, then, are not just productivity hacks for a calmer life. They are a gateway that leads you away from the noisy surface into the place where real transformation happens. A gateway that allows you to finally meet yourself. And once that gate opens, you begin to see that the most important journey you can take isn't a trip across the world. It's the descent into the inner world. And when a person reaches that depth, something strange begins to happen. The outer world starts to reflect the order that has been found within. 5. The strange order that emerges when you return to your center. This is where it gets fascinating. When you begin to live in alignment with your true self, stripped of the social masks, integrated with your shadow, and centered in your own energy, the world around you starts to rearrange itself. It's as if your external life begins to mirror the new harmony you've created inside. Relationships that once drained you start to fade or transform. Opportunities that felt like long shots suddenly land in your lap at the perfect moment. People call this luck, coincidence, or being in the right place at the right time. But for Jung, this was something far more profound. He called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. He observed that when a person is living in accordance with their deepest self, events in their life no longer appear random. They begin to connect in ways that defy simple cause and effect logic. It's not that the world is changing. It's that the individual has finally tuned their internal instrument to the key of the universe. Think of it like a radio. When you're on the wrong frequency, you get static. You can't hear the music. But when you tune the dial precisely, the music comes through clear and strong. Silence and focus are the process of turning the dial of your consciousness. You're tuning out the static of your own anxieties and societal noise to find your true frequency. You've likely experienced two very different modes of being. There are periods where your mind is chaotic, you're reactive, and everything in your life feels messy. Work is a struggle. Relationships are tense. You feel like you're swimming against the current. Then, there are other periods where you feel centered, calm, and focused. In these periods, you notice a strange flow. You meet the right person. A solution to a problem you've been wrestling with for weeks appears suddenly. Opportunities seem to unfold without you having to force them. This isn't magic. It's the shift in your state of being. Jung believed that our individual minds are not isolated. They are connected to a deeper layer of the collective unconscious, a shared bedrock of human experience. When you're out of sync with yourself, you're out of sync with this deeper layer. You're broadcasting on a frequency that doesn't connect. But when you align with your true self, you begin to resonate with this deeper universal layer. And from that resonance, synchronicities emerge. They are not supernatural miracles. They are the natural reflection of inner order in the outer world. Imagine a mirror. If the mirror is covered in dust and grime, the reflection is distorted. You can't see clearly, but when you clean the mirror, the image becomes sharp and true. Your life is like that reflection. When your mind is dominated by distraction, reaction, and noise, your experience of life is chaotic. When you clean the mirror with silence and focus, the world reflected back to you becomes clearer. Things fall into place not because the world changed, but because you changed. You've cleaned the lens through which you see everything. Have you ever noticed that when you decide you want to buy a specific car, you suddenly start seeing that model everywhere? It was always there on the road, but your brain didn't have the filter to notice it. Once you focused your attention, your awareness expanded to include it. Life works on a similar principle. When you focus your energy and intention on your own growth, your brain starts to notice opportunities, paths, and people that were always there, but that you were previously too scattered to see. What you focus on expands. The crucial point is that the rearrangement of life is not an external miracle. It's the natural outcome of a mind that has found internal order. Think of it as steering a ship. When the wheel is loose and you're letting every wave push you around, you're at the mercy of the ocean. But when you grab the wheel firmly, set a course, and focus your intention, the ship moves in a direction. The ocean is still vast and unpredictable, but you are no longer a victim of its chaos. You're a navigator. I've seen this transformation in many people. They leave jobs that were soul-crushing to pursue a more authentic path. They step away from relationships that had become hollow and draining. They make the scary decision to prioritize their own well-being over the expectations of others. And in the beginning, there's often doubt, loneliness, and criticism from those who benefited from their old, scattered state. But then, after a period of silence and focus, something shifts. They meet new, supportive people. They find a community that resonates with them. They achieve things they never thought possible. This isn't luck. This is the consequence of finally being in harmony with their own path. However, Jung offered a crucial warning here. You cannot fake this. You cannot try to manifest a better life by repeating affirmations while your inner world remains a war zone. You can't project confidence while you're secretly terrified. The deeper layers of your psyche, the unconscious, are always aware of your true state. You can fool others with a polished mask, but you can't fool the deeper currents of your own being. And it is that internal state, not your external presentation, that ultimately determines how life responds to you. So, if life feels chaotic, the first place to look isn't the world. It's the mirror. It's a sign that you've drifted from your own center. The solution isn't to search for more answers outside, but to do something much simpler. Pause. Become silent. Focus. And if you stay there long enough, you'll start to notice something remarkable. You don't need to force life to change. When your internal state shifts, life naturally begins to restore its own order around you. Things begin to fall into place. Not because you're controlling everything, but because you've finally returned to the one thing you were meant to control: yourself. Conclusion. After all of this, perhaps the most profound realization is that the deepest transformation doesn't require a grand heroic act. It often begins with something incredibly simple. Stopping. Stopping before you react. Stopping before you explain. Stopping the endless chatter long enough to hear the sound of your own breath. In that quiet space, you discover a truth that society has trained you to forget. Life does not require as much frantic effort as we believe. When the mind finds its center again, when the life force is no longer scattered across 1,000 roles and worries, the picture becomes clear. What doesn't belong to you, the borrowed expectations, the other people's dramas, naturally falls away. And what does belong to you, the path you were meant to walk, begins to arrive at your feet. Jung said that the person who looks only outward lives inside the dreams of the world. They are asleep, living a story written by others. But the one who dares to turn inward, to brave the silence and the shadow, awakens. And in that awakening, you understand that the order you've been searching for has never been about controlling your environment. It has always been about discovering the stillness that has been waiting for you, patiently, at the center of your own being. When you find that stillness, you stop trying to force life to change. You become the still point around which everything else can finally, quietly, find its rightful place.